The red and blue lights flashed in Marcus Williams's rearview mirror as he pulled over. Officer Jake Morrison approached with the practiced swagger of a man who knew exactly what he was about to do. When Morrison drew his service weapon and pressed it to the mayor's temple, he had no idea he was handing Marcus Williams the exact evidence needed to expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of law enforcement. The mayor-elect was about to become the prosecutor, and Millbrook's rotten system was about to face justice. But first, Marcus had to survive the next 60 seconds. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The thunderous applause echoed through the Millbrook Community Center as Marcus Williams stepped up to the podium, his dark eyes scanning the sea of faces before him. Campaign volunteers waved homemade signs, children sat on their parents' shoulders, and elderly residents who had lived through decades of broken promises watched with cautious hope. "Thank you, Millbrook." Marcus's voice carried over the crowd, steady and confident. "Tonight, we didn't just win an election. We chose change over complacency. We chose accountability over corruption. We chose a future where every citizen, regardless of zip code or skin color, can trust their government to serve them with integrity." The crowd erupted again, but Marcus caught sight of the television in the corner where Channel 7 was already calling the race. The ticker at the bottom read, "Williams defeats incumbent Mayor Thompson, 58-42, promises police reform." "For too long, our police department has operated without proper oversight," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "For too long, misconduct has been swept under the rug while communities suffer. That ends now. We will implement civilian oversight boards. We will require body cameras on every officer. We will hold those who abuse their badge accountable to the law they swore to uphold." Maria Santos, his campaign manager turned chief of staff, beamed from the side of the stage. She had warned him that the police reform message might cost votes, but Marcus knew it was why he had run in the first place. Growing up in Millbrook's East Side, he had seen too many friends harassed, too many neighbors brutalized, too many families destroyed by a system that protected its own, while terrorizing the communities it claimed to serve. Across town, Officer Jake Morrison crushed his beer can and hurled it at his television screen. The aluminum bounced off harmlessly, but the gesture felt good. Around him, his cramped apartment bore the evidence of a man whose life had spiraled. Empty bottles, overflowing ashtrays, and photographs of better times when the department had his back. "Civilian oversight," Morrison spat, mimicking Marcus's measured tone. "Body cameras. You have no idea what you're asking for, boy." His phone buzzed with a text from Captain Henderson. "Emergency meeting tomorrow. All senior officers." Morrison knew what that meant. Williams had made himself a problem that needed solving. The celebration at the community center was winding down when Marcus finally made his way to his car. The parking lot had mostly emptied, leaving only a few stragglers and the cleanup crew. He had insisted on driving himself tonight, despite Maria's protests about security. Old habits died hard. He had spent years as a civil rights attorney driving to meetings in hostile neighborhoods, and he valued the quiet time to think. As he unlocked his Honda Civic, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Law school on scholarships, years of fighting police brutality cases, watching settlements get paid out while officers returned to duty. He had grown tired of treating symptoms instead of the disease itself. The mayor's office would let him attack the problem at its source. His phone rang as he started the engine. Maria's name flashed on the screen. "You should have let us arrange a police escort," she said without preamble. "I'm fine, Maria. I've been taking care of myself for 42 years. You're not just yourself anymore. You're the target of every cop who thinks reform means unemployment." Marcus pulled out of the parking lot onto Riverside Drive, the city's main thoroughfare that connected downtown to the residential areas. Streetlights cast long shadows between the old oak trees that lined the road. "They'll have to get used to change," Marcus said. "That's what we promised the voters. Just be careful, okay?" Henderson called already. "Wants a meeting next week to discuss your transition plans." "I'll bet he does." Marcus ended the call and focused on the road ahead. In 2 months, he would take the oath of office. In 2 months, he would have the power to implement real reform. But first, he had to survive the transition. The red and blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror just as he turned onto the quieter residential street that led to his neighborhood. Marcus's heart rate quickened slightly, not from guilt, but from the learned wariness of a black man who had spent too many years documenting what happened when traffic stops went wrong. He pulled over and rolled down his window, keeping his hands visible on the steering wheel. The officer approached slowly, flashlight beam dancing across the asphalt. When the light hit Marcus's face, he saw recognition flicker in the man's eyes. "License and registration," the officer said, his voice flat and professional. Marcus reached slowly for his wallet. "Officer, I'm Marcus Williams. I was just elected mayor tonight." The officer's nameplate read, "Morrison." "I know exactly who you are," Morrison said, his hand moving to rest on his service weapon. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus's throat went dry as he stared up at Morrison through the open car door. Something in the officer's eyes, a cold, predatory gleam, told him this wasn't a routine traffic stop. "Is there a problem, Officer Morrison?" Marcus kept his voice steady, though his pulse hammered against his collar. "Oh, there's a problem, all right." Morrison's hand tightened on his weapon. "You think you can waltz into City Hall and destroy everything we've built? You think we're just going to roll over and let some uppity lawyer tear down our department?" Marcus slowly raised his hands. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not trying to destroy anything. I want to make our police department better. More accountable." "Accountable?" Morrison's voice cracked with rage. "You want to put cameras on us like we're criminals. You want civilians judging every split-second decision we make. You have no idea what it's like out there." "Then help me understand." Marcus fought to keep his tone calm, professional. "We can work together." Morrison laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the empty street. "Work together? With you? After what you did to Officer Reynolds in that brutality case? After you made us look like monsters on national television?" Marcus remembered the case, a teenager beaten so badly he'd needed reconstructive surgery. The settlement had been substantial, but Reynolds had kept his badge. Another symptom of the disease Marcus intended to cure. "Reynolds violated that boy's civil rights," Marcus said quietly. The video evidence was clear. The video showed a split second of a dangerous situation. It didn't show the weeks of dealing with gang violence, the threats against our families, Morrison stopped himself, breathing heavily. "You wouldn't understand. You've never worn the badge." "You're right. I haven't. But I've spent 15 years cleaning up the messes when officers like Reynolds crossed the line." Morrison's face twisted with hatred. "Officers like Reynolds? You mean officers like me?" The admission hung in the air between them like a loaded gun. Marcus felt the world narrow to this moment, this street, this man whose career depended on keeping the darkness hidden. "Officer Morrison, I think we should continue this conversation at the station with a supervisor present." "No." Morrison drew his service weapon in one smooth motion, pointing it directly at Marcus's head. "We're going to finish this conversation right here." Marcus's hands shot up higher, his body flooding with adrenaline. "Whoa, whoa! Put the gun down. Whatever you think I've done, whatever you're afraid I'm going to do, we can talk about this." "Afraid?" Morrison stepped closer, the barrel of his gun now inches from Marcus's temple. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm tired of you. Tired of lawyers like you making our jobs impossible. Tired of bleeding hearts who think criminals deserve more protection than the officers trying to keep the peace. Please, Marcus whispered, feeling the cold metal against his skin. I have a family. You have nothing. Morrison's voice rose to a shout. You have no idea what you're messing with. The department has ways of dealing with problems, and you just became our biggest problem. Marcus closed his eyes, his mind racing. This wasn't random. This wasn't a single disturbed officer. Morrison had used the word we. This was organized, planned. How many others were involved? How deep did this go? The voters chose me, Marcus said, opening his eyes to meet Morrison's gaze. They chose change. You can't stop that by killing me. Watch me. Morrison's finger began to tighten on the trigger, and something snapped inside Marcus. 15 years of fighting for justice, of watching corrupt officers walk free while their victims suffered, of promising voters he would make things better. It all crystallized into a single moment of clarity. He would not die on his knees. As Morrison's finger began to squeeze, Marcus lunged sideways and upward, his left hand grabbing for the gun while his right drove toward Morrison's throat. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the air as both men crashed to the ground. You should have minded your own business, Morrison grunted, trying to maintain control of his weapon as they rolled across the rough asphalt. Marcus got his hands around Morrison's wrist, fighting desperately to keep the gun pointed away from both of them. Morrison was older but heavier, his police training evident in the way he tried to regain the advantage. But Marcus had desperation on his side, and the lean strength of someone who had never stopped fighting for what he believed in. This isn't over, Morrison wheezed as they continued to struggle. There are others. We won't let you destroy everything. The confession sent ice through Marcus's veins even as he fought for his life. Others. This was bigger than one racist cop with a grudge. This was a conspiracy, and he had just painted a target on his back that wouldn't disappear even if he survived the next few minutes. Marcus slammed Morrison's gun hand against the pavement, fighting to dislodge the weapon. The older officer threw a vicious elbow that caught Marcus in the ribs, sending sharp pain through his chest. You think you can protect your criminal friends? Morrison snarled, spittle flying from his lips. Think you can let them run wild while you handcuff the good guys? Marcus managed to roll on top, pinning Morrison's gun arm. What criminals? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me. Morrison bucked upward, nearly throwing Marcus off. Every drug dealer, every gangbanger who walks free, because bleeding hearts like you think they're misunderstood. You people always stick together, don't you? The racial venom in Morrison's voice made Marcus's blood boil, but he forced himself to focus on survival. He brought his knee up hard into Morrison's solar plexus, causing the officer to gasp and momentarily loosen his grip on the gun. You're insane, Marcus panted, trying to pry the weapon free. I'm trying to make the community safer for everyone. Morrison's free hand found Marcus's throat, thick fingers squeezing. Safer? You want to tie our hands while animals roam the streets? Well, here's some real justice for you. With a surge of strength born from desperation, Marcus broke Morrison's chokehold and drove his fist into the officer's nose. Blood spurted as cartilage cracked, and Morrison's grip on the gun finally loosened enough for Marcus to knock it away into the darkness. You broke my nose, Morrison roared, blood streaming down his face. You're going to pay for that, boy. Marcus scrambled backward as Morrison lunged at him, the officer's face a mask of rage and blood. They crashed into Marcus's car, Morrison's hands reaching for Marcus's throat again. 23 years on the force, Morrison gasped as they grappled. 23 years keeping scum like you in line, and now you want to put me under a microscope? Make me the bad guy. Marcus managed to get behind Morrison, his arm snaking around the officer's thick neck. "You are the bad guy. You just tried to execute me. Should have minded your own business," Morrison wheezed, clawing at Marcus's arm. "Should have stayed in your law office, filing your pretty papers." Marcus tightened his grip, cutting off Morrison's air supply. The officer's struggles grew more frantic, then gradually weaker as consciousness began to slip away. "There are others," Morrison whispered, with his last breath of awareness. "You can't stop all of us." When Morrison finally went limp, Marcus released him and stumbled backward, his hands shaking as he checked for a pulse. Still alive, still breathing, but unconscious. Marcus looked around wildly, his lawyer's mind finally catching up to the reality of his situation. He had just assaulted a police officer, or defended himself from an attempted assassination. But who would believe his version? Morrison's words echoed in his mind. There are others. This wasn't the desperate act of one unhinged cop. This was organized. He retrieved Morrison's gun with a shaking hand, ejected the clip, and scattered the bullets into the storm drain. The weapon itself he wiped clean and tossed into the bushes where it couldn't be easily found. Then he ran back to his car, his mind reeling with implications. As he drove away, leaving Morrison unconscious on the empty street, Marcus realized the full scope of what he faced. How many others were involved? How high did this conspiracy reach? Captain Henderson had called for an emergency meeting. Was he part of it too? What about the other senior officers? His hands trembled on the steering wheel as the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold understanding of his isolation. He couldn't call 911. What if the dispatcher was connected to Morrison's allies? He couldn't trust the police department to investigate fairly. He couldn't even be sure his own security detail wouldn't be compromised once he took office. For the first time since law school, Marcus Williams felt truly afraid. Not just for his life, but for everything he had worked to achieve. The voters had given him a mandate for change, but change required staying alive long enough to implement it. He pulled into his driveway and sat in the darkness, trying to process what had just happened. Morrison's blood was still under his fingernails. His ribs ached from the elbow strike. His throat burned where the officer had tried to choke him. But Marcus was alive, and Morrison's conspiracy was exposed, even if only to him. Now he had to figure out how to survive long enough to bring justice to those who thought they were above the law. The mayor-elect had just learned that his real education was about to begin. Marcus sat in his car outside his house for 20 minutes, watching shadows for movement that wasn't there. Every car that passed made his heart race. Every neighbor walking their dog could be a threat. When he finally worked up the courage to go inside, he triple-checked the locks and drew every curtain in the house. His reflection in the bathroom mirror told the story. Torn shirt, scraped knuckles, a bruise forming on his throat where Morrison had tried to choke him. The face looking back wasn't the confident mayor-elect who had addressed supporters just hours ago. This was a man who had narrowly escaped execution. "Think, Marcus," he whispered to himself, running cold water over his bloodied hands. Morrison said there were others. Who? How many? How do you fight an enemy you can't identify? He couldn't call the police. That much was obvious. But he also couldn't simply wait for the next attempt. Morrison's failure would buy him time, but not much. They would regroup, plan better, maybe send someone more competent next time. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, looking for someone, anyone, he could trust with this information. His finger hovered over Maria Santos's name. She had been with his campaign from the beginning, had access to his schedule, knew all his routines. But Morrison's conspiracy could reach anywhere. How could he be sure she wasn't involved? Meanwhile, 3 miles away, Jake Morrison was regaining consciousness on the cold asphalt, his head pounding and his throat raw. Blood from his broken nose had dried into a crusty mask across his face. He struggled to his feet, swaying slightly as the world spun around him. That little... Morrison touched his nose gingerly and winced. The pain brought clarity, and with it, panic. Williams was alive. Williams had escaped. And worst of all, Williams now knew about the conspiracy. Morrison stumbled to where his patrol car sat abandoned, engine still running. His gun was gone. Williams must have taken it or hidden it. His radio crackled with routine dispatches, the normal rhythm of police work, continuing as if his world hadn't just collapsed. He needed to call Captain Henderson immediately, but not over the radio. Too many ears listening to police frequencies. Morrison pulled out his personal cell phone with shaking fingers. "Henderson," came the gruff voice after 2 rings. "Cap, we have a problem. A big problem." "Morrison, where the hell have you been? You missed your check-in an hour ago." Morrison looked around the empty street, suddenly aware of how exposed he was. "I need to see you. Tonight, not at the station." "What happened? You sound like—" "Williams is alive," Morrison interrupted. "The plan failed. He knows about us." The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like an eternity. When Henderson finally spoke, his voice was ice cold. "Get to the warehouse on Dock Street. Now. Don't use your radio. Don't talk to anyone, and don't go home. We need to contain this before it spreads." The line went dead, leaving Morrison alone with his failure and the growing certainty that his life had just become infinitely more complicated. Back at his house, Marcus had made a decision. He couldn't trust anyone in local law enforcement, but there were other options. Federal agencies had jurisdiction over civil rights violations and police corruption. The FBI had field offices designed specifically for situations like this. But contacting them would have to wait until he could do it safely, without tipping off Morrison's co-conspirators. For now, he needed protection, and he needed information. Marcus opened his laptop and began researching private security firms. If the police couldn't be trusted to protect him, he would have to protect himself. The irony wasn't lost on him, the mayor-elect hiding from the very department he had promised to reform. His phone buzzed with a text message from Maria. "Great speech tonight. Can't wait to get started on the transition. Meet tomorrow at 9 a.m. to go over the first 100 days?" Marcus stared at the message, paranoia gnawing at him. Was this innocent enthusiasm, or was Maria fishing for his location and schedule? How could he continue his duties as mayor-elect without revealing his movements to potential enemies? He typed back, "Something came up. We'll call you tomorrow to reschedule." It was a small lie, but necessary. Until he could figure out who to trust, Marcus Williams was on his own in a fight that had barely begun. Across town, Captain Bill Henderson sat in his car outside the warehouse, smoking his 3rd cigarette in 10 minutes. 28 years on the force, 15 as a captain, and it might all come crashing down because Jake Morrison couldn't handle one simple task. Henderson's phone buzzed with updates from his network of loyal officers. The emergency meeting he had called for tomorrow would need to be moved up. They had a crisis to manage, and loose ends to tie up before Williams could cause any more damage. The game had changed, but it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Marcus woke before dawn, his body aching from the previous night's struggle. He had slept fitfully, jerking awake at every sound, the house settling, a car door slamming down the street, the neighbor's cat knocking over a trash can. Each noise could have been Morrison's associates coming to finish what their colleague had started. Over coffee, he researched private security companies on his laptop, focusing on firms with federal law enforcement backgrounds. He needed people who couldn't be bought by local corruption, professionals who understood the difference between protection and intimidation. His phone rang at 7:30. Maria's name flashed on the screen. "Marcus, are you okay? You sound different in your text last night." "I'm fine," he lied, watching the street through his kitchen window. "Just exhausted from the campaign. You know how it is." "Well, we need to start transition planning. The current administration is being cooperative, but Captain Henderson specifically requested a meeting with you this week. He says he wants to discuss departmental concerns about your reform proposals." Marcus's blood ran cold. Henderson, the same Captain Morrison had mentioned, the one calling emergency meetings. "Tell Henderson I'll get back to him. I need to review some files first." "Marcus, you're starting to worry me. Is everything really okay?" The concern in Maria's voice sounded genuine, but Marcus couldn't take chances. "Everything's fine. I just need a few days to get my bearings." "Can you handle the routine meetings without me?" After ending the call, Marcus dialed the number for Sentinel Security Solutions, a firm run by former Secret Service agents. When he explained he needed immediate personal protection for political reasons, they didn't ask questions. "We can have a team in place by noon," the dispatcher assured him. Discreet, professional, and experienced with high-profile clients facing credible threats. Meanwhile, at the Dock Street warehouse, Captain Henderson faced 5 of his most trusted officers around a folding table covered with coffee cups and cigarette butts. Morrison sat with an ice pack pressed to his swollen nose, avoiding eye contact with his superior. "So, let me understand this," Henderson said, his voice deadly calm. "Our new mayor knows about our operations. He's got physical evidence of attempted murder, and he's probably already figuring out how to expose us all. Is that about right, Morrison?" "He sucker-punched me, Cap. I wasn't expecting him to fight back." "You weren't expecting a lot of things, apparently." Henderson turned to the other officers. "Gentlemen, we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Williams can't be allowed to take office. The federal oversight he's promising would destroy everything we've built here." Officer Danny Reeves, a 15-year veteran with dead eyes, leaned forward. "What are our options?" "Morrison's already blown the direct approach. Williams will be expecting another attempt from one of us." Henderson lit a fresh cigarette. "We need to think outside the department. Make it look like street crime, gang violence, something that can't be traced back to us." "I know some people," offered Officer Rick Torres. "Guys who need money and don't ask questions. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." Henderson nodded approvingly. "That's thinking smart. Williams probably thinks he's safe now, maybe getting cocky. But he doesn't understand how deep this goes. How many people have a stake in keeping things the way they are?" Morrison finally looked up from his ice pack. "What about the gun he took from me?" "Report it stolen from your personal vehicle," Henderson replied. "File the report today. Establish the timeline. If it ever surfaces, we have plausible deniability." Back at his house, Marcus was reviewing his options when the Sentinel security team arrived. 2 men in their 40s, dressed casually but carrying themselves with the bearing of experienced professionals. "Mr. Williams, I'm Agent Davis. This is Agent Rodriguez. We understand you're facing some security concerns." Marcus led them inside, still unsure how much to reveal. "I have reason to believe there may be threats against me related to my election platform." "Police reform?" Davis asked. "We've worked similar cases. Dirty cops don't like oversight, and some of them get desperate when they're cornered." The casual acknowledgement of police corruption felt like validation. These men understood what Marcus was facing. "Can you provide protection without drawing attention?" "I still have official duties to perform." Rodriguez nodded. "We specialize in discreet protection. No one will know we're there unless they try something stupid." As the security team conducted their initial assessment of his home and routines, Marcus felt the first stirrings of hope since Morrison had put a gun to his head. He wasn't completely alone in this fight. But across town, Henderson's network was already setting their new plan in motion, recruiting assets that couldn't be traced back to the police department. The war for Millbrook's future had entered a new phase, and both sides were preparing for a battle that would determine whether justice or corruption would ultimately prevail. With his security team maintaining a discreet perimeter, Marcus finally felt safe enough to begin his own investigation. He started with public records, using his attorney credentials to access court documents and financial filings that might reveal the scope of police corruption in Millbrook. What he found in the basement archives of the courthouse made his stomach turn. "Jesus," he muttered, spreading files across a table in the empty records room. Over time, reports showed officers claiming impossible hours, some logging 30-hour shifts that would have been physically impossible. Evidence locker inventories had discrepancies worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Civil settlements for police misconduct had cost the city over $2 million in the past 3 years alone. But most damning were the arrest records showing a pattern of cases being dropped or evidence mysteriously disappearing, always involving the same group of officers. Morrison's name appeared frequently, along with Henderson, Torres, and 3 others Marcus didn't recognize. His phone buzzed with a text from Agent Davis. "Possible tail on your location. Gray sedan, 2 occupants. Stay inside until we give all clear." Marcus's hands tightened on the documents. They had found him already. 20 minutes later, Davis called. "False alarm. Just paranoid citizens wondering why there's extra security at the courthouse. But we did notice some interesting radio chatter on police frequencies. Someone's been asking about your whereabouts." "Any idea who?" "Negative, but we're monitoring the situation." "How much longer do you need?" Marcus looked at the mountain of evidence still to review. "Give me 1 more hour. This is bigger than I thought." Meanwhile, across town at Rosario's bar, Officer Rick Torres was having a very different kind of meeting. The bar was nearly empty at 3 in the afternoon, just Torres and 2 men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. 5,000, Torres said, sliding an envelope across the scarred wooden table. "Half now, half when it's done." The taller of the 2 men, a gaunt figure with prison tattoos covering his forearms, shook his head. "For a mayor? That's heat we don't need, man. Make it 10. 7.5, Torres countered. "And it needs to look like a robbery. Guy drives a Honda Civic, lives alone, minimal security. Should be easy money." The shorter man, stockier with nervous eyes, leaned forward. "What kind of minimal security? You didn't mention security." Torres waved dismissively. "Probably just an alarm system. Rich guy like that, he's not expecting real trouble. Just make sure you take his wallet, watch, whatever. Make it look convincing." "When?" the tall man asked. "Tonight would be good. He's been staying home. Probably thinks he's safe. Hit him when he's walking to his car." The 2 criminals exchanged glances. 7,500 was more money than they'd seen in months. But killing an elected official carried risks that went beyond local law enforcement. "We'll need clean weapons," the tall man said finally. "Nothing that traces back to us, or you. Already taken care of." Torres slid another package across the table. "Untraceable. Just remember, robbery gone wrong. Nothing political about it." Back at the courthouse, Marcus had uncovered something that made everything else pale in comparison. A series of evidence room entries that corresponded exactly with major drug arrests that had later been dismissed on technicalities. Someone was stealing confiscated drugs and selling them back onto the streets, then using their position to ensure the original dealers walked free. "My God," he whispered, photographing the documents with his phone. "They're not just corrupt. They're running their own drug operation." His phone rang. Maria's name on the display. "Marcus, where are you?" I've been trying to reach you all day. Channel 7 wants to do a follow-up interview about your first 100 days, and the city council is asking about transition meetings. I'm working on something important. Can you stall them? Stall them? Marcus, you're the mayor-elect. You can't just disappear when people need answers. The frustration in Maria's voice was genuine, and Marcus felt a pang of guilt. She was right. His responsibilities didn't stop because corrupt cops were trying to kill him. But how could he explain without putting her in danger? "Give me until tomorrow," he said. "I promise I'll have answers then." "Answers about what?" "Marcus, you're scaring me. If something's wrong, I need to know." Marcus looked at the evidence spread before him. Proof of a conspiracy that reached deep into the police department, involving drug trafficking, evidence tampering, and now attempted murder. Maria deserved to know what she was walking into, but knowledge would make her a target too. "Tomorrow," he repeated. "I'll explain everything tomorrow." As Marcus gathered his evidence and prepared to leave the courthouse, he didn't notice the gray sedan that had been circling the block for the past hour, its occupants studying the building's exits and making plans for the evening ahead. The war between corruption and justice was about to claim its first civilian casualties. Marcus sat in his living room at 10 o'clock that night. The evidence from the courthouse spread across his coffee table like pieces of a nightmare puzzle. Agent Davis stood by the window, watching the street through a gap in the curtains. "You should eat something," Davis said without turning around. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" Marcus couldn't remember. Food felt irrelevant when every breath might be his last. "I keep thinking maybe I should just withdraw from office. Tell people I've had a family emergency or health issues. Let someone else deal with this mess." "Is that what you want to do?" "I want to live long enough to see my next birthday." Marcus picked up a photograph showing evidence room discrepancies. "But if I walk away, nothing changes. These guys keep selling drugs, planting evidence, beating people who can't fight back. The voters trusted me to fix this." Davis finally turned from the window. "In my experience, the people who step up when things get dangerous are usually the same ones who never wanted the job in the first place. The ones who do it because someone has to." Marcus's phone buzzed with another text from Maria. "Are you okay? I'm worried about you. Please, call me." He stared at the message, torn between his need for help and his fear of putting her in danger. Maria had been his closest advisor throughout the campaign, the one person who understood his vision for reform. She deserved to know what she was walking into. But knowledge was dangerous. Morrison's conspiracy had already tried to kill him once. What would they do to someone helping him expose their crimes? "I need to make a call," Marcus said, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. Maria answered on the first ring. "Marcus, thank God. I've been going crazy wondering what's happening. Can you come over? There's something I need to tell you, but not over the phone." "Is this about the police reform stuff? Because if the department is pushing back harder than expected, just come over, please. And Maria? Don't tell anyone where you're going." An hour later, Maria Santos sat across from Marcus in his living room, her face pale as she absorbed what he had told her. The evidence files were spread between them, and Agent Davis had retreated to the kitchen to give them privacy. "My God, Marcus, they tried to kill you. They actually put a gun to your head. The question is, what do I do now? I can't govern a city when half the police department wants me dead. But if I step down, they win. The corruption continues. People keep getting hurt." Maria leaned forward, her voice intense. "You can't step down. Do you understand what message that sends? That anyone who tries to fight corruption can be intimidated into quitting? That reform is impossible? Easy for you to say. You're not the one they're trying to assassinate." "No, but I'm the one who's been working toward this moment for 2 years. We didn't run this campaign so you could hide in your house with bodyguards." Maria's eyes flashed with anger. The Marcus Williams I know doesn't run from a fight, especially when the stakes are this high. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a spark of the determination that had carried him through law school, through years of civil rights cases, through a grueling campaign. Maria was right. Running away would betray everyone who had voted for change. If I stay, they'll keep trying to kill me. If you help me, they might come after you too. Then we better make sure we get them first. The conviction in her voice reminded Marcus why he had chosen her as his chief of staff. Maria Santos had grown up in the same neighborhoods he had seen the same injustices. She understood what was at stake. Okay, Marcus said, feeling resolve crystallize in his chest. We do this together. But we do it smart. No more working alone. No more keeping secrets from each other. Agreed. What's our first move? Marcus looked at the evidence spread across his table. We need federal help. The FBI has jurisdiction over police corruption cases, but we need to contact them carefully. Make sure word doesn't leak back to Henderson's people. Meanwhile, across town, Jake Morrison was having his own moment of doubt. He sat in his pickup truck outside a 24-hour diner, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His nose was taped and bandaged, purple bruises spreading under both eyes. Henderson had given him clear orders: lay low, file the stolen gun report, and wait for the civilian contractors to finish what he couldn't. But Morrison kept thinking about Williams's words during their struggle. You are the bad guy. 23 years on the force. Morrison had joined because he wanted to help people, to make a difference. When had that changed? When had he become someone who tried to execute an elected official in cold blood? His phone buzzed with a text from Henderson. Contractors are in position. Should be over soon. Morrison stared at the message, his finger hovering over the reply button. He could still stop this. He could call Williams, warn him, maybe even testify against Henderson's network in exchange for a lighter sentence. But then he thought about prison, about what happened to ex-cops behind bars, about losing his pension, his house, everything he had worked for. Morrison deleted the message without replying and drove home, telling himself that Williams had brought this on himself. Some choices, once made, couldn't be undone. The next morning, Marcus and Maria drove to a coffee shop 30 miles outside Millbrook, their route carefully planned to avoid police patrol areas. Agent Rodriguez followed in a separate vehicle, while Davis maintained watch at Marcus's house, a deception designed to make anyone monitoring believe the mayor-elect was still at home. You're sure about this FBI contact? Maria asked, as they parked behind the small cafe in Riverside Township. Rebecca Torres has a reputation for going after corrupt cops. If anyone will take this seriously, it's her. Marcus gathered the copied evidence files from his briefcase. The key is making contact without alerting Henderson's network. Inside the cafe, Marcus used a burner phone to call the FBI field office. After being transferred twice, he finally reached Agent Torres. Agent Torres, this is Marcus Williams, the mayor-elect of Millbrook. I need to report a conspiracy within our police department, including attempted murder. The pause on the other end stretched for several seconds. Mr. Williams, that's a serious allegation. Are you somewhere safe to talk? Relatively. I have evidence of corruption going back years, drug trafficking, evidence tampering, financial fraud. And 2 nights ago, Officer Jake Morrison tried to execute me during what he made look like a traffic stop. I need you to come in immediately. Can you get to our field office without being followed? I think so. But Agent Torres, this goes high up in the department. Captain Henderson is involved, possibly others. We can't trust anyone in local law enforcement. Meanwhile, at Henderson's warehouse meeting spot, the corrupt captain was receiving his own disturbing phone call. The voice on the other end belonged to someone who monitored FBI communications as a favor to certain interested parties. Henderson, you've got a problem. Williams just contacted Agent Torres. They're meeting today. Henderson's cigarette burned down to his fingers without him noticing. How long do we have? Not long. Torres moves fast when she smells corruption. If Williams has real evidence, he does. Henderson crushed the cigarette under his heel. Morrison screwed up everything. Williams knows about our operations. Then you better hope your civilian contractors are more reliable than your cops. The line went dead, leaving Henderson staring at his phone. He immediately called Torres. Not Agent Torres, but Officer Rick Torres. Rick, change of plans. The Williams problem needs to be handled today, before nightfall. The contractors aren't in position yet. They were planning to wait until... I don't care what they were planning. Henderson's voice cracked with desperation. Williams is talking to the feds. If he makes it through another day, we're all going to prison. At the FBI field office in downtown Springfield, Marcus spread his evidence across Agent Torres's conference table while Maria provided additional context about campaign promises and reform plans. This is extensive, Torres said, photographing each document. Evidence room discrepancies, overtime fraud, civil settlements. How did you get access to all this? Public records, mostly. Some from my time as a civil rights attorney handling police brutality cases. Marcus pointed to the most damning files, but the pattern is clear. They're stealing confiscated drugs and selling them back onto the streets, then using their positions to ensure the original dealers walk free. Torres nodded grimly. We've seen similar operations in other cities. It's more common than the public realizes. She looked up from the documents. Tell me about the attempt on your life. Marcus recounted the encounter with Morrison, from the fake traffic stop to the struggle that ended with the officer unconscious on the street. And you're certain he said there were others involved? His exact words were, "There are others. We won't let you destroy everything." Then he mentioned that the department has ways of dealing with problems. Torres made notes on a legal pad. We'll need to move quickly. If Henderson suspects federal involvement, he might try to destroy evidence or eliminate witnesses. What kind of protection can you provide? Maria asked. We can coordinate with your private security, add some of our own people. But Mr. Williams, you need to understand. If you proceed with this, there's no going back. These people have already tried to kill you once. Federal investigation will make them even more desperate. Marcus looked at Maria, then back at Torres. If I don't proceed, they keep destroying lives. They keep selling drugs in neighborhoods where children play. They keep beating people who can't fight back. He straightened in his chair. I didn't run for mayor to play it safe. Torres smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. Good. Because we're going to need you to keep acting normal while we build our case. Can you handle that? Define normal, Marcus said, because nothing about this situation feels normal. At that moment, across town, Henderson's hired contractors were conducting their final surveillance of Marcus's house. They had no idea their target was 40 miles away, cooperating with federal agents who were about to turn their world upside down. The tall man with prison tattoos adjusted his grip on the untraceable pistol. Remember, make it look like a robbery. In and out, quick and clean. His partner nodded nervously. What if those security guys are around? Then we improvise. 7,500 buys a lot of motivation. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to become the final pieces of evidence Agent Torres needed to bring down Henderson's entire network. Agent Torres worked quickly once Marcus and Maria left her office. Within 2 hours, she had assembled a task force of agents who specialized in police corruption cases and coordinated with the U.S. Attorney's Office to begin preparing federal charges. We need surveillance on Henderson, Morrison, and the other officers Williams identified, Torres told her team. Full electronic monitoring, phones, computers, financial records. and I want protective surveillance on Williams around the clock." Agent Kevin Walsh, a veteran of similar cases, raised his hand. "What about the private security Williams already has in place?" "We coordinate with them, but don't rely on them. If Henderson's people are planning another attempt, it could come fast and hard." Torres pulled up building schematics on her computer. "Williams's house is too exposed. We need to move him to a safe location." Meanwhile, Marcus was driving back to Millbrook with Maria, both of them feeling cautiously optimistic for the first time in days. "Torres seems competent," Maria said. "Professional. Like she's handled this kind of thing before. The question is whether we can stay alive long enough for her to build a case." Marcus checked his mirrors for the third time in 5 minutes. "Henderson has to know we're getting close. Desperate people make dangerous choices." As if summoned by his words, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Williams," he answered cautiously. "Mr. Mayor-elect, this is Captain Henderson. I think it's time we had a conversation." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. He gestured frantically to Maria, who immediately began recording the call on her phone. "Captain Henderson, what can I do for you?" "You can stop making accusations against good officers. Officer Morrison filed a report this morning claiming you assaulted him and stole his service weapon. That's a serious crime, Mr. Williams. Morrison pulled a gun on me and tried to kill me. I defended myself." Henderson's laugh was cold and humorless. "That's not how the report reads. And without witnesses or evidence to support your version, it's your word against a decorated officer with 23 years of service." Marcus gripped the phone tighter. "What do you want, Henderson?" "I want you to understand the situation you're in. You're making enemies of people who've dedicated their lives to keeping this city safe. That's not smart for someone who's about to depend on police protection." The threat was clear, even if carefully worded. Marcus looked at Maria, who was pale but still recording. "Are you threatening me, Captain? I'm educating you about political reality. Sometimes reform means working within existing systems rather than trying to tear them down. Maybe we can find some middle ground." "What kind of middle ground?" "The kind where everyone gets to keep their jobs and their reputations intact. The kind where new mayors don't have unfortunate accidents during their first weeks in office." Marcus felt rage building in his chest. Henderson wasn't even trying to hide his involvement anymore. "I see. And if I don't agree to this middle ground, then you'll discover that being mayor is a dangerous job. Lots of opportunities for things to go wrong. Car accidents, home invasions, random street crime. Millbrook can be a very unpredictable place." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in shock. "Did you get all that?" he asked Maria. "Every word. Torres is going to love this." But as they drove through downtown Millbrook, neither of them noticed the two men in the gray sedan, who had been following them since they left the FBI office. Henderson's contractors had been waiting for their return, and the captain's phone call had been perfectly timed to distract them from checking their mirrors. The tall man with prison tattoos spoke into his radio. "Target is heading home. We're in position." 2 blocks behind them, FBI agent Walsh was conducting his own surveillance, photographing the contractors and coordinating with Torres. "I've got eyes on 2 subjects following Williams," Walsh reported. "Hispanic male, approximately 6'2", passenger appears shorter and stockier. They've been tailing since downtown." Torres's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Do not intercede unless Williams is in immediate danger. We need them to make their move so we can connect them back to Henderson." As Marcus pulled into his driveway, he was focused on getting inside to call Agent Torres about Henderson's threats. He never saw the 2 men parking across the street, weapons concealed under their jackets. Agent Davis met them at the door. "How did it go with the FBI?" "Better than expected," Marcus said, not noticing Davis's tense posture. Torres is taking this seriously. She's already assembling a task force. Good, because we may have company. Rodriguez spotted possible hostiles conducting surveillance while you were gone. Marcus's feeling of optimism evaporated. How possible? Definite enough that I've called for backup. FBI is coordinating with us now. Across the street, the two contractors were making their final preparations, unaware that federal agents were photographing their every move and recording their communications with Henderson's network. The trap was set. The only question was who would spring it first. Agent Torres arrived at Marcus's house within 30 minutes, but she made sure her team entered through the back alley and kept their vehicles out of sight. The dining room became a command post, but all surveillance equipment was positioned away from windows where it might be spotted. Henderson's phone call was perfect, Torres told Marcus, as they reviewed the recorded conversation in hushed tones. Direct threats against an elected official, conspiracy to obstruct justice, intimidation of a federal witness. We've got enough to arrest him right now. But you're not going to, Marcus said, reading her expression. Not yet. We want the whole network, not just the leadership. Your attackers across the street are going to lead us to everyone involved. Torres gestured toward thermal imaging equipment that showed the gray sedan's occupants. 2 subjects, both armed, but they don't know we're here. When they make their move, we'll be ready. Maria paced nervously in the back hallway, away from any windows. What if something goes wrong? What if they get past your people? They won't, Agent Walsh whispered from his concealed position, monitoring communications. We have agents positioned throughout the neighborhood, but staying invisible. Marcus, the key is acting completely normal. These guys are watching for any sign you suspect they're there. Marcus nodded, though his hands were shaking. How normal can I act when I know there are killers waiting for me? Normal enough that they think they have an easy target, Torres replied quietly. Your private security team has been instructed to maintain their regular patterns, but stay ready for our signal. Across the street, the 2 contractors were feeling confident as evening approached. The shorter man, Luis Valdez, had been watching Marcus's house all day and liked what he saw. Just the mayor and that woman who works for him, Luis whispered to his partner. Security guys left an hour ago. Feds haven't shown up. This should be straightforward. The tall man, Carlos Mendez, checked his stolen pistol one more time. Torres said the target's been paranoid since Morrison screwed up, but he's not expecting us. Thinks he's safe at home. Perfect. We wait until it gets fully dark. Then we make our move. In and out, make it look like a robbery gone bad. Luis pulled out his phone and texted Officer Torres. Coast is clear. Moving in 1 hour. The response came back immediately. About time. Henderson's breathing down my neck. Make it clean. Inside the house, Agent Walsh intercepted the text exchange in real time, but the contractors had no idea their communications were being monitored. They think they're in the clear, Walsh whispered to Torres through his earpiece, planning to move within the hour. Torres spoke quietly into her radio. All units maintain concealment. Let them get close enough to commit to the crime before we move. Marcus tried to go through normal evening routines, making dinner, watching the news, but every sound made him jump. When a neighbor's dog barked, he instinctively ducked below the window line. You're doing fine, Maria whispered, though her own voice was tight with anxiety. Just remember, Torres's people are everywhere. You're not really alone. Tell that to my nervous system, Marcus replied, forcing himself to sit back down on the couch, where he would be visible through the front window. As darkness settled over the neighborhood, Carlos and Luis conducted their final equipment check. Both men carried untraceable weapons provided by Officer Torres. Both believed they were about to commit a simple assassination disguised as a home invasion. Neither realized that federal agents had been photographing and recording their every move for hours, building an airtight case that would connect them directly back to Henderson's conspiracy. Remember the plan: Carlos whispered, as they prepared to leave their car. "Front door. Make it look like a break-in. Take his wallet and watch to sell the robbery angle. 2 shots. Center mass. Then we're gone." "What about the woman?" "Witnesses or complications. No witnesses, no problems." They had no way of knowing that their whispered conversation was being recorded by federal surveillance equipment, or that Agent Torres was coordinating 8 armed agents positioned around Marcus's property. The trap was perfectly set. In 15 minutes, Henderson's hired killers would walk directly into federal custody, providing the final evidence needed to destroy the police corruption network that had plagued Millbrook for years. Marcus Williams sat in his living room, apparently defenseless and unaware, waiting for men who thought they were about to commit the perfect crime. They were about to discover just how wrong they could be. At 9:47 p.m., Carlos and Luis crossed the street toward Marcus's house, moving through shadows between street lights. They had watched the neighborhood for hours and seen no sign of unusual activity. The mayor-elect appeared to be alone with his female aide, both visible through the front windows. "Just like Torres promised," Luis whispered, as they approached the front door. "Easy money." Carlos carried a crowbar to force entry while Luis gripped his pistol. Neither man noticed the federal agents positioned in neighboring yards, watching their approach through night vision scopes. Agent Torres spoke quietly into her radio from her concealed position. "Subjects approaching target residence. All units hold position until they commit to entry." Inside the house, Marcus sat frozen on his couch, watching the shadows move across his front yard. His mouth was dry, his hands clenched into fists. Maria crouched behind the kitchen counter, her phone ready to call 911 if something went wrong with the federal operation. Carlos inserted the crowbar into the door frame and applied pressure. The wood splintered with a sharp crack that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. "Breaking and entering in progress," Torres whispered into her radio. "Stand by." The front door swung open, and both contractors stepped inside with weapons drawn. Luis immediately spotted Marcus on the couch and smiled coldly. "Marcus Williams, you're about to learn what happens to people who don't mind their own business." Marcus raised his hands, playing his part perfectly. "Take whatever you want. Money, jewelry, whatever you're looking for." "What we're looking for," Carlos said, raising his pistol, "is you dead." That was the signal Torres had been waiting for. "FBI, drop your weapons." "You're surrounded!" Floodlights blazed to life around the house as federal agents poured through windows and the back door. Carlos and Luis spun in shock, suddenly finding themselves facing 8 armed federal agents with assault rifles. "Drop the weapons now!" Agent Walsh shouted, his rifle trained on Carlos. Carlos immediately threw his pistol to the floor and raised his hands. "Don't shoot! We surrender!" But Luis hesitated, his mind racing. Before accepting this job, he had made Officer Torres promise that if something went wrong, the corrupt cop would make sure Luis's 8-year-old daughter received his share of the payment. Torres had agreed, even put it in writing. Now, surrounded by federal agents, Luis realized Torres had lied about everything else. Why would he keep that promise? "Luis, drop the weapon," Torres commanded. Instead, Luis turned his pistol toward Marcus. If he was going to prison anyway, he might as well complete the job. His daughter needed that money more than he needed to live. "For Isabella," he whispered, and pulled the trigger. Agent Walsh's rifle cracked a split second later. Luis's shot went wide, punching through the wall behind Marcus's head as the federal agent's bullet struck Luis center mass. The contractor collapsed to the floor, his weapon clattering across the hardwood. "Suspect down. Medical assistance required." Torres barked into her radio while agents secured Carlos, who was sobbing and begging not to be shot. Marcus remained frozen on the couch, his ears ringing from the gunshots, unable to process that he was still alive. Maria rushed from the kitchen and threw her arms around him. "It's over," she whispered. "Marcus, it's over." But Agent Torres was already coordinating the next phase of the operation. With Carlos in custody and Luis wounded but alive, they had living witnesses who could testify against Henderson's network. "Get me Captain Henderson on the phone," Torres told Agent Walsh as paramedics worked on Luis. "Tell him we have his contractors in custody, and they're very eager to make a deal." Carlos, handcuffed on the floor, looked up at Torres with desperate eyes. "I'll tell you everything. Henderson hired us through Officer Torres. They paid us to kill Williams and make it look like a robbery. I have text messages, recordings, everything." Marcus finally found his voice. "Henderson did this?" "Henderson, Morrison, Officer Torres, and at least 3 others we know about," Torres replied. "But thanks to tonight, we're going to get them all." Outside, Luis was being loaded into an ambulance while crime scene technicians began processing evidence. The gray sedan would be impounded, searched, and connected back to the police corruption network through forensic evidence. Within hours of the contractor's arrest, Captain Henderson launched a desperate counterattack. By dawn, every major news outlet in the region was running stories about Mayor-elect Marcus Williams's alleged involvement in a staged home invasion designed to frame innocent police officers. "This is character assassination," Maria said, scrolling through her phone as she and Marcus sat in the FBI's temporary command center. "They're saying you hired those men to attack you so you could justify federal intervention in the police department." Marcus stared at the television screen showing Henderson in full dress uniform, flanked by 3 other captains, addressing reporters on the steps of police headquarters. Marcus Williams has been waging a vendetta against hard-working officers since his days as a so-called civil rights attorney, Henderson declared, his voice steady and authoritative. Last night's theatrical performance was nothing more than an elaborate fraud designed to destroy the reputation of men and women who risk their lives to keep this community safe. Agent Torres clicked off the television in disgust. "He's good. Making himself look like the victim while you're painted as the corrupt politician." "It's working," Marcus said, reading news comments on his phone. "Half the city thinks I staged the whole thing. My approval ratings are cratering before I even take office." Officer Rick Torres, Henderson's man inside the department, had spent the morning calling every contact he had in local media, spreading a carefully crafted narrative that portrayed the federal investigation as politically motivated harassment. "The FBI is being used as Williams's personal attack dog," Torres told Channel 7's morning show. "They arrested 2 men who were probably just trying to burglarize his house, then turned it into some grand conspiracy theory to justify their witch hunt against dedicated officers. Meanwhile, Morrison was making his own television appearances, his bandaged nose adding credibility to his claims of being assaulted by the mayor-elect. "Williams attacked me during a routine traffic stop," Morrison told reporters. "When I tried to arrest him for driving erratically, he became violent and stole my service weapon. Now he's trying to cover up his crimes by accusing me of attempted murder." The police union rallied behind Henderson's version of events, organizing a press conference where dozens of officers in uniform stood together in solidarity. "We call on the FBI to investigate Marcus Williams for conspiracy, fraud, and assault on a police officer," Union President Dave Kowalski announced. "This man is not fit to serve as mayor of any city in America." But Agent Torres was fighting back with evidence. She called her own press conference that afternoon, presenting recordings of Henderson's phone threats and the contractor's confessions. "Let me be clear," Torres told the assembled media. "We have recorded conversations proving that Captain Henderson threatened Mayor-elect Williams's life. We have 2 suspects in custody who have confessed to being hired by corrupt officers to commit murder. This is not a political investigation. This is a criminal conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of the Millbrook Police Department." She played the audio of Henderson's threatening phone call to Marcus, his voice clearly audible. Sometimes reform means working within existing systems, rather than trying to tear them down. You'll discover that being mayor is a dangerous job. Car accidents, home invasions, random street crime. The recording sent shockwaves through the press conference, but Henderson's supporters weren't finished. Officer Danny Reeves, one of Henderson's inner circle, stood up during the Q&A period. That recording could have been doctored by federal agents working with Williams. Where's the chain of custody? Where's the independent verification? Other officers began shouting questions designed to cast doubt. Why didn't Williams report the alleged assault immediately? Why did he hire private security before any threats were made? Why won't he submit to a polygraph test? The coordinated attack was effective. By evening, polls showed the city split almost evenly between those who believed Marcus was a victim of police corruption and those who thought he was a fraud trying to destroy good officers for political gain. "They're better at this than I expected," Torres admitted to Marcus as they watched the evening news coverage. "Henderson's turning this into a public relations war, and he's got the advantage of wearing a badge." Marcus felt the weight of doubt pressing down on him. Maybe I should withdraw from office. Let someone else clean up this mess. That's exactly what they want, Maria said fiercely. They're trying to wear you down, make you quit before the investigation can expose the truth. Torres nodded. Henderson knows we have enough evidence to convict him, but he's gambling that public pressure will force you to back down and us to abandon the investigation. Classic corrupt cop playbook. Attack the victims, defend the system. Marcus looked at the evidence files spread across the table, then at the television showing Henderson receiving support from police officers across the state. How do we fight this? We let the evidence speak, Torres replied. And we hope Carlos and Luis are willing to testify in public about who really hired them to kill you. The turning point came when Carlos Mendez agreed to testify publicly about Henderson's conspiracy. Agent Torres arranged for a live press conference where the contractor would detail how he and Luis had been hired to murder Marcus Williams. This is our best shot at breaking through Henderson's propaganda, Torres told Marcus as they prepared for the afternoon press conference. Carlos has text messages, payment records, everything we need to prove the conspiracy. But Henderson wasn't going to let his network collapse without a fight. We can't let that scumbag testify, Henderson told his remaining loyal officers during an emergency meeting at the warehouse. Once he starts talking on live television, it's over for all of us. Officer Danny Reeves leaned forward across the table. What are you suggesting, Cap? I'm suggesting that Carlos Mendez is a dangerous criminal who might try to escape federal custody. Accidents happen during prisoner transport. Morrison, despite his public denials, was growing increasingly uncomfortable with how far they were willing to go. Henderson, we're talking about killing a federal witness. That's not police work, that's survival. Henderson slammed his fist on the table. You think they're going to stop with us? Once the feds take down this department, they'll use it as a model to go after cops everywhere. We're fighting for every officer in America. Officer Rick Torres nodded grimly. The transport route from the federal building to the courthouse is predictable. There's a stretch on Highway 9 where we could make it look like an accident. At that moment, Marcus was reviewing Carlos's testimony with Agent Torres when her phone rang with an urgent call from the federal marshal's office. Agent Torres, we've intercepted police radio chatter about the prisoner transport. Multiple units requesting information about Mendez's route to the courthouse. Torres's face went pale. They're planning to hit the transport. We need to change the route immediately. Already done, the marshal replied. But Torres, this is escalating beyond simple corruption. These officers are talking about eliminating federal witnesses. That's domestic terrorism. Marcus overheard the conversation. and felt his stomach drop. They're going to try to kill Carlos to prevent him from testifying? It looks that way. Henderson's network is more desperate than we realized. Torres began making calls to coordinate additional security. We need to move the press conference to a secure location. But Henderson's people were already in motion. Officer Reeves had positioned himself along the original transport route, armed and ready to stage what would look like a tragic accident during prisoner transport. When the federal marshal's convoy failed to appear at the expected time, Reeves realized their plan had been compromised. He radioed Henderson immediately. "They changed the route, Cap. Mendez isn't coming this way." Henderson's voice crackled with rage over the radio. "Then we go to the source. If we can't stop the witness, we stop the investigation." Marcus was at the federal building, preparing for Carlos's testimony, when Agent Walsh burst in with alarming news. "We've got multiple police units converging on this location." 15 officers, all from Henderson's network, claiming they're responding to a bomb threat. Torres immediately understood the implications. They're creating a pretext to storm the building. In the confusion, they could claim Marcus was killed by unknown assailants. "Can they do that?" Maria asked, her voice tight with fear. "They're about to try," Torres replied, coordinating with federal security. "This building is federal property. Any assault on it is a federal crime, but that won't matter if they succeed in eliminating witnesses." Outside, Henderson's convoy of police vehicles surrounded the federal building. The captain stepped out of his cruiser wearing full tactical gear, addressing his officers through a bullhorn. "We have credible intelligence of a bomb threat against this federal facility. Our duty is to ensure public safety, even if federal agents try to obstruct our investigation." Agent Torres watched from a window as Henderson's forces took positions around the building. He's lost his mind. Attacking a federal building with witnesses inside. This isn't corruption anymore. It's rebellion. Marcus stood beside her, watching the armed officers outside. "What happens now?" "Now we find out whether justice is stronger than corruption," Torres replied, speaking into her radio to coordinate with FBI tactical teams. "Because Henderson just declared war on the federal government." The siege of the federal building was about to begin, with Marcus Williams caught in the middle of a battle that would determine whether the rule of law could survive against organized police corruption. The standoff lasted 6 hours, but Henderson's rebellion collapsed when FBI tactical teams arrived from 3 neighboring states. The corrupt captain and his officers found themselves surrounded by federal agents who vastly outnumbered and outgunned them. "Captain Henderson, this is Agent Torres. You're surrounded by federal agents. Order your officers to stand down immediately." Henderson stood behind his patrol car, radio in hand, watching FBI snipers take positions on nearby rooftops. His 28-year career was ending in a federal standoff that would make national headlines. "This isn't over, Torres," Henderson shouted back. "You think you can destroy an entire police department over the word of criminals and corrupt politicians? It's over, Henderson. Your officers are already surrendering." Indeed, most of Henderson's support was melting away as officers realized they were facing federal charges for assaulting a government building. Morrison was the first to throw down his weapon and walk toward federal agents with his hands raised. "I surrender," Morrison called out. "I want to make a deal." Within minutes, Henderson stood alone as his entire network abandoned him. Officer Danny Reeves, Rick Torres, and the others all laid down their weapons and submitted to federal arrest. "You're all cowards," Henderson screamed at his former allies. "We could have fought this together." But the fight was over. Agent Torres personally placed Henderson under arrest as news cameras captured every moment. "William Henderson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, civil rights violations, drug trafficking, evidence tampering, and assault on a federal facility," Torres announced for the cameras. "You have the right to remain silent." Henderson's arrest broke the dam. Within days, Morrison and 6 other officers were providing detailed testimony about years of corruption, drug trafficking, and brutality. The evidence warehouse Torres had promised became reality as financial records, communication logs, and witness statements painted a comprehensive picture of systematic police corruption. Carlos Mendez testified before a federal grand jury, describing in detail how Henderson's network had hired him and Luis to murder Marcus Williams. His testimony, combined with recorded phone calls and financial evidence, resulted in federal indictments against 11 officers. The corruption in the Millbrook Police Department represents one of the most extensive cases of organized police criminality in modern American history, U.S. Attorney Janet Richardson announced at a press conference. These officers betrayed their oaths, violated citizens' rights, and attempted to murder an elected official to protect their criminal enterprise. Marcus Williams was finally sworn in as mayor 6 weeks later, in a ceremony held at the federal courthouse under heavy security. Agent Torres attended the inauguration, watching as Marcus delivered his first official speech as mayor. Today, we begin the work of rebuilding trust between our community and law enforcement, Marcus told the assembled crowd. With federal oversight and new accountability measures, we will create a police department that serves all citizens with integrity and respect. The reforms Marcus implemented were comprehensive. Every officer was required to wear body cameras. A civilian oversight board gained real power to investigate misconduct complaints. The police budget was restructured to emphasize community policing over military-style equipment. Most importantly, Marcus hired Agent Torres as Millbrook's new chief of police after her retirement from the FBI. The community deserves leadership they can trust, Marcus explained to reporters. Rebecca Torres has spent her career fighting police corruption. She's exactly what this department needs. Henderson and his co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years in federal prison. Morrison, who cooperated fully with the investigation, received 12 years. The contractors, Carlos and Luis, received reduced sentences in exchange for their testimony. Maria Santos was sworn in as deputy mayor, helping Marcus navigate the complex work of rebuilding a city's faith in its government. "We did it," she told Marcus on their first day in the renovated mayor's office. "We actually did it." Marcus looked out his window at the city he now led, a city where police officers would finally be held accountable for their actions. "No," he replied. "We started it. Real reform takes years, maybe decades, but at least now we have the foundation to build something better." 6 months later, Marcus Williams stood at the podium in Millbrook's renovated community center, addressing a crowd that looked very different from his election night gathering. This audience included police officers in the new department uniforms, community leaders who had been skeptical of reform, and families who had been victims of the old system's brutality. "When I ran for mayor, I promised accountability," Marcus said, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had survived assassination attempts and emerged stronger. "I promised transparency. I promised that our police department would serve everyone in this community with equal respect and dignity." Chief Rebecca Torres sat in the front row, wearing the badge she had earned through decades of fighting corruption. The transformation of the Millbrook Police Department under her leadership had exceeded even Marcus's expectations. "The numbers speak for themselves," Marcus continued, gesturing to a presentation screen behind him. "Excessive force complaints are down 70%. Community trust in law enforcement has increased by 60%. And most importantly, crime rates have dropped to their lowest levels in 20 years. The applause was genuine, coming from people who had watched their city transform from a place where corrupt cops operated with impunity to one where officers were held to the highest standards. After the presentation, Marcus walked through the community center, shaking hands with residents who approached him with gratitude and hope instead of fear and suspicion. "Mayor Williams," said Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly woman whose grandson had been beaten by Morrison 3 years earlier. "I never thought I'd live to see the day when I could trust a police officer again. But yesterday, Officer Johnson helped my neighbor when her car broke down. He was kind, respectful. That's how it should be." Marcus smiled, remembering the fear in her eyes during his campaign visits to her neighborhood. "That's how it will be from now on, Mrs. Rodriguez. We've built something that will last." Later that evening, Marcus and Maria sat in his office reviewing the latest crime statistics and community feedback reports. The walls were decorated with awards the city had received for innovative police reform, including recognition from the Department of Justice as a model program for other municipalities. "Channel 7 wants to do a follow-up story," Maria said, scrolling through her phone. "6 months after the corruption scandal, how has Millbrook changed? They want to interview some of the officers who testified against Henderson." "Set it up," Marcus replied. "The more transparency, the better. People need to see that change is possible." His phone buzzed with a text message from Agent Torres, now Chief Torres. The message included a photo from the Police Academy graduation ceremony that morning, showing 12 new officers taking their oath of service. "New recruits sworn in today," the text read. "All passed extensive background checks and psychological evaluations. The future of policing in Millbrook looks bright." Marcus looked out his office window at the city he had fought to save. Streetlights illuminated neighborhoods where children could play without fear, where residents called police when they needed help instead of avoiding them at all costs. Henderson was serving his 30-year sentence in federal prison, his appeals exhausted. Morrison had been denied parole and would serve at least 10 more years. The other corrupt officers had scattered to various federal facilities across the country, their careers and reputations destroyed. But Marcus didn't dwell on their punishment. He focused on the future, on police officers who wore body cameras not because they were forced to, but because they understood accountability protected both citizens and good cops. On a community that was healing from decades of institutional trauma. On young people who might actually consider law enforcement as a noble profession again. "You know what I'm proudest of?" Marcus asked Maria as they prepared to leave for the evening. "The fact that you survived assassination attempts and still managed to implement every campaign promise?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm proud that next year, when we have new mayoral elections, the biggest issue won't be police corruption. It'll be normal political stuff. Budgets, infrastructure, education. That's what a healthy democracy looks like." As they walked out of City Hall together, Marcus Williams reflected on the journey that had brought him from that terrifying night when Morrison put a gun to his head to this moment of genuine civic transformation. The mayor-elect, who had once fought for his life in a dark street, was now the mayor who had proven that courage, persistence, and federal backup could triumph over even the most entrenched corruption. Millbrook was finally the city its residents deserved, a place where justice wasn't just a word on courthouse walls, but a living reality in every neighborhood, protected by officers who truly served and protected all citizens equally. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.